Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to FaiyadFit. Today we got a very special guest, Daniel Haqiqatjou. Assalamu alaikum, bro. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, bro?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. There's been a lot of people that have been DMing me today that they read the title of the video, How Muslims Are Being Infiltrated. They have no idea what we're going to talk about today, but I feel like we should just jump in with my first question. May Allah bless all the viewers that are here. I want to give a huge shout out to this sub. Wa alaikum salam, brother. I'm a mother of 4 young boys and listen to your content often. May Allah reward you for the advice and direction you give to the young brothers and sisters. Allahumma ameen. Make dua for us. So the first question that I'm going to go into, and it's something that's been on my mind for a while, but who exactly is infiltrating Islam? Who would you say has the greater burden of responsibility? Is it the non-Muslims, the enemies of Islam, or would you say it's the Muslims inside that are trying to, I guess, compromise the integrity of the fortress from within?
Well, we can't do much against the non-Muslims who have plans to infiltrate. So I think the burden is on Muslims. So, I mean, there's different levels of infiltration into the Muslim community. I mean, there are literally spies, like one type of infiltration, and definitely our Arab brothers and sisters are more familiar with this, but there have been literally cases within Sham, like in Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, where someone is an imam of the Muslim community for 20 years or more. And then it's found out that this was actually an Israeli spy. Like, this was an Israeli spy who has lived as a Muslim, as an imam, even has gotten married, has a family, and he's just a spy, like literally feeding Israel information about Muslims. So there are cases like this. This is the kind of infiltration that we're talking generations ago, maybe 50, 60 years ago. Now the type of infiltration is exactly the same kind of thing, except maybe it's not going to be someone living as an imam for 20 years. But you have, like, I remember when I lived in Boston, we were teaching a new Muslims class. So I was the main teacher in the masjid, and I wasn't a new Muslim, but I had like enough training to be able to teach these new Muslims. And this was, around after 9/11, basically. And we were at the masjid. It's like a pretty not big but well attended masjid in Boston. And there was a couple of converts that came in. Now, one convert was interesting. He said that he's a convert. He was European. He had like a heavy European accent, and he was saying, "Yeah, I'm so interested in Islam. I want to be Muslim. I want to learn more." So people told me to come to this new Muslims class and learn. So great, we welcome everyone, and we're studying basic things like what are the pillars of Iman in Islam. Anyway, after a couple of classes, this guy says he wants to convert, like he wants to become Muslim. Alhamdulillah, he wants to give his shahada. We're all, very happy and excited, and the other new converts in the class were excited. But then after a month or so, he's coming to class and he's like wearing like a shirt that's promoting Al Qaeda. Like, he's wearing a shirt and saying, he's literally wearing a shirt with OBL, OBL, Osama, on his shirt. And it's like, and this was like pretty close after 9/11. So we're like, bro, I'm not sure if this is wise. Do you know like what is the deal with these issues, like with these groups and what they're advocating for? Do you know? And then he started like already, he's only been Muslim, quote unquote, for a month, but he's already Sheikhul Islam. Like, he's already telling us, like, no, you guys are munafiqeen, and
Oh,
you don't know, you don't know like the true Islam. This is the true Islam. We have to declare jihad. So I mean, this person eventually he stopped coming. The masjid board got involved, and it seemed like this is infiltration. Like, this is just a provocateur who had come into the Muslim community. And there are so many cases of that, and there's documentation. There's books on this idea of manufacturing terror and infiltrating the Muslim community with feds, with agents. So this is a known tactic. This is a known tactic of infiltration, and things like this are on the increase. Actually, they were on the increase with the Biden administration, but ever since this war with Palestine and Israel, you're going to get a lot more of these kinds of infiltrations, and it happens in masajid, like in mosques, but it also happens online. So people don't realize that you're on a Muslim forum, or you're in a group chat, or you're in one of these groups on social media like Facebook, Twitter, whatever, Kick, whatever, and it's clearly infiltrated. Like, there are people there who their only purpose is to monitor everything that is being said in that group, and they'll put out bait. Like, they'll put out bait and say, like, we really need to get rid of all the Jews, like something like that, or we really need a second, H word. I won't say it for the sake of your stream, but they're just putting out bait, and they want to see who reacts and what is said. And then those people are literally monitored, they're surveilled. And it's, some people say, well, don't be too paranoid. Like, no, they can't monitor all of us. That's not true. Like, I agree, you shouldn't be paranoid, but that doesn't mean that they're not tracking you. you know they are, like, they're tracking everyone. And because of AI now, these things were revealed like 10 years ago when Snowden, Edward Snowden, he came out with his leaks because he was a contractor for the NSA, excuse me, NSA and CIA. So he leaked a bunch of information about how the government is tracking everything we do electronically. And now with AI, they can parse through that data and they can build profiles for every single person. And it doesn't really require some individual to go and find a needle in a haystack. You have AI that does that automatically for you. They can assess you, like, what's your dissident rating, like or social credit score is a term that's often used. What is your social credit score? How much of a dissident are you potentially? So those things, they are scary in a certain sense. In another sense, they're like, what can you do? Like, that's just the way that the modern world is. And we just have to be aware of it and not be naive about the kinds of infiltration that's taking place. Now, the responsibility of Muslims, like Muslims, we should really address the infiltration that comes from liberalism, the infiltration that comes from secularism, feminism. That's a big psyop, and I've really dedicated a lot of my online dawah to addressing like this type of infiltration. Like, oh, you're a imam, like a traditional scholarly imam, and you claim to respect the Islamic tradition, yet you also want to reform Islam and you want to secularize Islam. You want to introduce like new regulations in Islam to change like Muslim family law, Muslim divorce and marriage law. Like, you want to change the way that Muslims structure their communities and their societies, their countries. Like, you're anti-Khilafah, you're anti like Sharia on the public level. So how can you be a traditional imam? That's my question. Like, that's major infiltration. That's the kind of infiltration that is going to have a lot of damage, because if non-Muslims, like let's say these feds or whoever, or Zionists, they're infiltrating the Muslim community, yeah, it's going to lead to Muslim deaths. It potentially Muslims being put in prison, Muslims being detained. But when imams come in and they're really secularists and dressed as traditional imams, then they're affecting people's iman. They're affecting people's understanding of religion and the deen, and that will have lasting impact for generations. So that's the type of infiltration that can be really dangerous, and it's a type of infiltration that has happened since the beginning of like the colonial period. Because without getting into too much history, you have had this effort to reform Islam and to turn Islam into basically liberal secularism, feel good, candy cane Islam. And to do that, the European colonialists understood that, well, we can pretend like we're religious institutions, imams. Let's infiltrate, let's take over their universities. Let's take over their madrasas. Let's take over and have them put out fatwas that are saying things like, yeah, marrying multiple wives, that's haram. Like, that's not for our time. That's in the past. Muslim women, take off your hijab. As long as you're modest in your heart, that's all that's needed. You don't have to cover even things like drinking alcohol, even things like eating during Ramadan. Like, these are actual fatwas that were coming out in the past 100 years. And some Muslims have forgotten about that period of our history, but it hasn't gone away. The methods just have become a little bit more sophisticated. The psyop has just become more sophisticated. It's evolved over time. So that's the infiltration that Muslims really have to be worried about.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people that are claiming now that Andrew Tate could be a spy, or Andrew Tate could have been an agent, or he's bought. But before I go into it, I do want to ask you a question that a lot of people might be wondering. How do you know when to discern an imam as compassionate? Because there's a level of, I almost like, authority that the average layman gives to scholars and anybody online blindly. Maybe they perhaps lack that self-discipline, or I guess that trust in themselves on a scholarly level. Of course, to an extent, Allah did reveal the Quran for everybody. But there are people that almost feel that they have no personal control over interpreting the Quran. So they just completely defer all authority, religious authority, to imams and scholars. And you have the likes of those like Shabir Ali that will say, Christmas is okay, riba is okay, XYZ is okay. And a lot of people fall for these imams because they don't know any better. So what advice would you have to the average Muslim viewer that's watching this and feels like, you know what, how do I know who I'm actually looking up to is trustworthy?
You have to do comparisons, and you do have the responsibility first and foremost. Like, it's not just a blank check. Where, oh, I'm just following someone, and therefore if he's bad or good, it doesn't matter. I'm fine. I'm just following. No, you have a requirement. Like, you have to understand who you're following, because this is also in the akhirah. Plenty of the disbelievers, this is exactly what they claim. They say, well, we're just following our leaders, or we were following our forefathers, or we were following shaitan. And that is not going to be a valid excuse. You can't just say that I was following. Allah will say, no, you made that choice. And in fact, the ones that you are following, they disavow you. Like, they disavow. They say, I didn't force you to follow me. That was your choice. So you do have a responsibility to understand and recognize, is the person that you're following, the imam, is he a valid person to follow? And is his teaching of Islam valid? And there's a very simple way to determine this. The way to determine this is, are they teaching Quran and Sunnah as understood by the scholars of Islam? Are they really sticking to the Islamic tradition? Are they sticking to what Islam teaches? Or are they introducing newly invented matters, innovations? Are they saying something that has never been said before? Literally no one has made the statements that they're making. Then that is a very clear sign that this is not someone to follow. And this is perhaps this is what we can call a compassionate imam or a reformist. So I'll give you some examples without mentioning names if you don't want, of what I've criticized. Like, I've criticized imams. Okay, what have I criticized imams for? Have I just been nitpicking? Am I just a hater? Am I just jealous? So there was. Now it's not the case. But if you go back to 2016 and 2017, there was a big push for the Muslim community to align with the left-wing Democrats and to endorse LGBT rights. There was a big push, and you had imams and institutions, some of these big Muslim institutions in the West, and they were telling Muslims that, look, LGBT, obviously in your personal private life, it's haram, but when it comes to the law, Muslims should stand with LGBT. We should stand with the politicians who support LGBT, people like Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib or Keith Ellison or whoever. we have to stand with them and we have to support their rights. We have to. This is the Islamic thing to do, and you have to go vote. You have to participate. You have to support these politicians and these policies. And that is something unprecedented. That is something that we don't see anything like that anywhere in Islamic history, where any scholar says that you have to support the right of homosexuals to get married, and you have to support the right of homosexuals to live as homosexuals, and to be allowed to marry, be allowed to adopt children, be allowed to gender transition, be allowed to do all of this thing. No one in Islamic history has ever said this, that Muslims can support this as a right. And I challenged like these imams to provide proof and to give an argument that's soundly based on Islamic scholarly tradition. They couldn't do it. And so it becomes clear that this is something very dangerous. You're changing Islam. Like this is reform. Like what is more clearly reform than that? So it was required to call them out, and it was through an intense effort over years to oppose them and to oppose their program. Eventually, they started pulling back. Eventually, they started conceding. Like eventually, some of their main cheerleaders, some of the main compassionate imams, they didn't admit that they were wrong. By the way, they didn't have the integrity to say that. They didn't have the integrity to say that Daniel was right, we were wrong. They said that they just started saying the right thing. They just started repeating my points. That no, we shouldn't support. We should actually oppose, or this is going too far. They started pulling back. Why? Because partly there was just so much intense pressure against them, thanks to the efforts of myself and others. But then also there was the change in public sentiment as well, because now there was more of a backlash against Pride and LGBT, and a lot of companies stopped promoting Pride Month in June, and there was like a little bit of a cultural backlash, like this is just too much, this is too far. So then I think that also gave these imams, these compassionate imams, room to step back a little bit themselves. But that's just more of an indictment. That's more of revelation that how compromised these imams are, that they only waver, or the decisions that they make are in such large degree based on what public sentiment is and what is politically correct enough for them to say. So if someone like Matt Walsh or the Daily Wire, or I don't know, Lex Friedman, or any of these other podcasters, or Joe Rogan comes out and says, or Donald Trump comes out, and a large group of people in media start saying that, yeah, we're not okay with 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds getting gender transition. If they start saying, okay, now we can come out and say it. Now we can say it as well. So this is, Muslims should be leading. Like we should. And by the very fact that we have, as Muslims, Allah has given us the greatest gift, which is Islam, and the greatest gift, which is revelation, the Quran and Sunnah. We have the guidance on all of these issues. The guidance on LGBT, for example, has been given to us in the Quran with the story of Lut alayhi salam, the prophet, and his people. We have to be at the forefront. We have to be leading the moral discourse on for misguided people, for Western people that they don't have. That's part of Dawah. The part of Dawah is a moral message. What is right and what is wrong. That is a part of calling to Islam. That is a part of calling to worship of Allah, is clearly defining and explaining what is right and wrong. We have that guidance. We don't have to blindly guess. We don't have to blindly trip and fall and make mistakes like they do in non-Muslim societies. So that gives us more of a burden that we have to be leading the moral discussion on LGBT or any other issue. But instead, these compassionate imams, they're just following. What's safe, guys? What's safe enough for me to say? What's safe enough for me to talk about? Or what's safe enough for a position for me to take? So that's one issue that I called them out on. Another issue is feminism. Like just constant simping, bro. Constant simping. And you think that the Islamic tradition, like the great ulama of our tradition, were simps? Like, they weren't simps. They weren't putting out this simping nonsense about women's rights, unlimited women's rights, unlimited gives for women, whatever women want. You just give them whatever they want, no matter what. Like, that's not Islam. That's not a part of Islam in any form or fashion.
Mm.
But that's the kind of message that these compassionate imams are giving. So that needs to be called out. Like, that's not a matter of ikhtilaf. That's not a matter of, oh, it's just a difference of opinion. Difference of opinion, what is valid ikhtilaf, is based off of what we see a large group of Muslim scholars in our history having a valid ikhtilaf on. That's how we define ikhtilaf. Valid ikhtilaf is not like you're just a 21st century imam and you think that, oh, all of a sudden we have to be feminists, or all of a sudden women have the right to do whatever they want no matter what, and they deserve to, marry however they want, divorce however they want, take care of kids or not take care of their children however they want, with no consequences. Like, oh, so I'm an imam and I have that opinion, therefore it's a valid ikhtilaf by definition. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't. We have a standard, an objective standard to compare against, to compare you against, and that's the beauty of Islam. That's the beauty of having a preserved Islamic tradition, that we don't have to have this guesswork. We can compare. Like, we can look at what they're saying and look, what am I saying? Things that I say, maybe I'm questionable. Maybe I have opinions or I have views that are questionable. And you ask me and you interrogate me, but I go back and I have to prove myself. No, what I'm saying is 100% in line with Islamic orthodoxy. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong.
Absolutely, bro. That was very well put. Before we touch back into this, I do want to address this elephant in the room right now. And I didn't really come out with it because I'm not one to necessarily just make content for the sake of making content. And I could have made this video a long time ago, but I just decided not to because it would be petty and I always want to assume good of my brothers. But I made a video about Andrew Tate a few months ago, and a lot of people have been saying since the beginning, oh, he's a spy. His dad was in the CIA. You never know with Tate. He's an agent. But for me, it's like, unless I have any reasons to prove otherwise, he's a sincere Muslim, and I have to assume good of him, right? I met up with his best friend, Sartorio Shooter, in Dubai multiple times. He's an excellent guy. Never met up with Tate, though, in person, but did speak to him, and he seems like a decent brother. Allahumma barak, right? After becoming a Muslim, he's been on his journey. He got locked up. He's been, very pro. Guys, we should free ourselves from the matrix, the shackles of the dunya, the shackles of the system. And a lot of the things he was saying were true. Now, he went on this one podcast with this brother named Michael something. I forgot what his last name was. It was that mob boss, that ex-mob boss. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And in that, he basically made a major blunder, right? There's got a lot of views, and he basically said, we as Muslims believe, in terms of Christians are right, everything's right. And I quote, the only difference is we have this extra thing, which is the Quran. Right. So he said that everything that the Bible says is fine. Everything's fine. We don't have an issue with it. We just have one extra prophet. And I made a video saying that this can't be true. How can two contradictory ideas both be correct? Right. Now, this doesn't mean we disrespect Christians, but theologically, there's major differences. And Allah addresses that in the Quran. So he said that we don't have any issues with Christians ideologically, except that we have this extra prophet. And I felt like that was very watered down, the way that he did that approach. And I simply made a video saying, hey, bro, like you're doing Christmas. Cool. You're a revert. There's the rahmah that comes with it. We don't support you doing this, but you're a new revert, just so you know it's wrong. Even when he reverted, he said God as an idea is powerful itself. We said no, God is not just an idea, right? But when he made this video, and I made that video correcting him very respectfully, I tried to have adab and everything. The next day, this video blows up, and I see on YouTube that it's gone. And I'm wondering, like, what's going on? So alhamdulillah, I saved the link somewhere. So whenever I clicked on the link, it said video removed by Emery Andrew Tate III, something like that. And I was just like, what is this? So I go onto Google, onto AdSense, see what's going on. And it basically said that Andrew Tate removed this video. And I was emailing back and forth with his legal team, trying to see what's going on. And they basically just said, hey, you can't have this video up. It's like targeting Andrew Tate or something like that. And I found that so rich coming from him, the guy that wanted to be a beacon of, let's escape the matrix, silencing us, attacking us, censoring us. We need to be free speech. He couldn't take a little bit of criticism. So I found that very interesting. But I never made a video about this, bro, because it's just a personal thing. There's no reason for that. But now you see things like this tweet that I want to address. He said Muslims in Europe are defending heinous crimes and then act confused when there is obvious bigotry against Islam in the future. The grooming gangs were disgusting. Every sane Muslim, every sane human is against them. The Muslims defending those actions purely because they were committed by other Muslims. Okay, he also talked about another thing that I want to add. He talked about we have an Islamist problem in the UK, right? It almost seems like now his identity is a Brit first and a Muslim second. He's been blocking people like Sajid and many other Muslims online and Smile to Jannah. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if he blocked you too,
Yeah,
but
he just blocked me today. Yeah.
he blocked you today. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Andrew Tate? What do you think is going on?
So I was happy, like you and others, that he became Muslim. We're happy whenever someone becomes Muslim. No doubt about it. And he encouraged, like, just by him converting, a lot of other people became Muslim because of that. So that is obviously something good. And the way that people were attacking him, like some Muslims were attacking him and saying that, no, we don't accept him as a Muslim. And if he becomes a Muslim, I'm going to leave Islam, like some of the feminists were saying, stuff like that. So that was uncalled for. You also had a little bit too harsh criticism against him because he was bringing in these red pill talking points. And yeah, I don't fully agree with everything in red pill, but red pill is way better than feminism. Like red pill is a necessary response, like a natural response from a secular person to feminism and the excesses of feminism. So he's just repeating, like, in his own way, red pill talking points. And the main reason that a lot of some of these Muslims or compassionate Muslims didn't like Andrew Tate was because he was pushing back against feminism. And they were just following that because they're brainwashed by feminism. So I defended Andrew Tate in those early years, but I was very clear from the beginning that Andrew Tate should not be taken as a role model. He is not knowledgeable. Like, he's just a new Muslim, so he doesn't necessarily know what is correct or incorrect in Islam. We just should be happy that he's a Muslim and pray that he learns and is a stronger and better Muslim over time. But unfortunately, he has not had a very positive trajectory. Like, he has it doesn't seem like he's learning about Islam. And it came out pretty early on that one of his sheikhs is Rabbi Faris. If you know Rabbi Faris, like this Madkhali agent, is his teacher. And he's not, like, he's making all of these very big blunders, like these big mistakes. So how many excuses can you give him? Now, I'm not trying to takfir Andrew Tate. I'm not trying to say that he's secretly not a Muslim. I think he's a Muslim. He should be considered a Muslim. He hasn't said or done anything that would take him out of Islam. That doesn't have a potential excuse that could excuse him. However, he's saying things that are really throwing Muslims under the bus. He is really siding with a lot of Zionists like Tommy Robinson. He's siding with Elon Musk, where Elon Musk is really agitating and creating all of this hatred for Islam and Muslims. He's siding with these people. And really, what's the reason for this? Like, why? He can, like, if he really wants to say something like, well, yeah, immigration, there are some issues that are caused by immigration in Western societies and their economic problems. And some of the people in Britain or the UK and in America, they have valid grievances. But, it's not fair to blame Muslims as a whole. It's not fair to blame immigrants as a whole. That's a kind of message, like, it's a balanced message that appeals to a lot of people with conflicting views. And it's sensible and it's reasonable and it's the truth. Like, that's the kind of thing that he should be saying. Instead, he's saying, no, yeah, Muslims are a problem. We have a problem with Islamic crime. And if I'm in charge, I'm going to send them back on the effing boat. I'm going to put you on an effing boat and kick you out. And yeah, why are Muslims defending the grooming gangs and the rapists? Who's defending these people, bro? Who's defending the groomers and the rapists? As far as I can tell, Muslims have been condemning that. Now you might want to critique some of the Muslim response and say, well, some of the Muslims, maybe they are insensitive to some of these concerns. Maybe some Muslims are too hasty to label you as an Islamophobe if you raise issue with some of these immigration policies or immigration grievances. Like, they'll just smear you as Islamophobe. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should just label someone an Islamophobe or racist and ignore them if they have a valid grievance. But that's not what's happening. That's not what this PSYOP is about with Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson. They're only bringing up this issue that Andrew Tate is also playing into, of grooming gangs and Pakistani rapists and immigrants who are causing crime. They're only bringing all this stuff up to distract from what Israel is doing, to distract from the genocide taking place of Palestinians. That's why this is re-emerged as an issue. Like, the actual quote-unquote grooming gangs that they're talking about, this is an issue from 2013. 2013, and Muslims came out en masse, over 500 different masajid in the UK, to condemn these grooming gangs that were uncovered. So to take that and say, oh, this is Islamic crime, and now we have to paint all of the Muslims as potential rapists or groomers, and they're causing a problem for the native population of the UK. Like, this is really just a Zionist psyop. And unfortunately, Andrew Tate keeps repeating their talking points and boosting that narrative at the expense of Muslims. So Muslims have to be clear that, look, Andrew Tate, just shut it. Like, shut up. You're not like our spokesperson. And I don't even know why you continue to be so popular. Like, your Hustlers University is basically a scam. And you're, he's been involved in all kinds of crypto scams as well. So this is like, you're just trying to stay relevant by being inflammatory. And we gave you like all the excuses. Like, we gave you plenty of excuses. And yourself, like, you're very respectful. I've been very respectful, trying to be. Why are we respectful? Because he is a new Muslim. He was put in prison for a very long time. He has been legitimately persecuted by Western governments, by the US government, through the Romanian government, and in the UK as well. So he has legitimately been persecuted. But that doesn't give you a blank check to just take us for granted and throw us under the bus and to defame Islam. Like, sorry.
Yeah. Absolutely. And bro, you're right. I didn't say anything when he became a Muslim. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, he was doing pimping and stuff, and a lot of feminists were against him. Muslims were saying, if he accepts Islam, I'm no longer going to be a Muslim. I said, no, you can't say that. This is deviant, right? We got to accept Andrew Tate for who he is and who he's presenting himself to be at the moment. We don't have any other evidence otherwise. He's a Muslim. But when he's coming out with things, taking legal action on me to remove a video just because he's butthurt over what I made a video on about him making wrong statements about us supporting the Bible 100%, you can't do that. And then, especially when you portray yourself to be one that's trying to be Morpheus from the Matrix, you're trying to portray yourself to be one that is speaking against the Matrix. So there's a comment from brother Luqman. What do the scholars say about someone who supposedly converted to Islam but then does everything to undermine the ummah? Isn't this level of husn al-dhan just self-destructive? What do you have to say to that?
No, it's not husn al-dhan. Like, just because you don't takfir someone doesn't mean you have husn al-dhan. Like, not takfiring someone is just a matter of caution, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a Sahih hadith said that if one Muslim calls his brother o kafir, meaning does takfir of him, then that's true for one of them. So if the person that you say o kafir is not actually a kafir, then you're the kafir. That's one interpretation, like a very common interpretation of that hadith. So when you look at Muslim scholars throughout history, they're very careful. Takfir requires a lot of caution.
Yeah.
And there has to be like something very clear cut. So someone could be doing all kinds of things to like undermine the ummah, undermine Muslims. And we don't necessarily do takfir, like explicit takfir, but there are other things that they're labeled with. They can be labeled a fasiq, like a wrongdoer, a fasiq.
Yeah.
They can be labeled a zindiq. Like zindiq doesn't necessarily mean a kafir. It could mean a kafir, like someone who's a non-Muslim. It could mean what technically zindiq means is like a crypto kafir, like someone who pretends to be Muslim, like, but you're not necessarily takfiring them, but you're strongly suspicious that this person is doing everything. Like, for example, some of these madkhalis that were supporting Israel and attacking the Palestinians and saying Palestinians are these grave worshipping mushriks, these grave worshipping mushriks who are allying with Iran, like they are this and that. Like, okay, what does that make? Like, do we do takfir of these madkhalis? Not necessarily, but we say that you are allying with a genocidal regime that is killing Muslims, so that your iman is in danger. Like, you are in danger of not being a Muslim. So if Andrew Tate actually continues, and he continues to stab Muslims in the back, he continues to ally with Zionists like Tommy Robinson, we should continue to call that out. We should criticize him. And husn dhan is not for public things that are being done. There's no dhan involved. Like, it's right in front of your eyes. Dhan means like suspicion, like something that is not definite. But when he's doing these things publicly, openly, then it's not a matter of husn dhan. We criticize, we condemn, and that's what we should be doing.
Absolutely. And do you think Ataturk was a zindiq based on the definition?
Yeah.
Subhanallah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, how can there be any doubt about Ataturk?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I'm going to go into one of the biggest slanders or allegations that have been made about you, and it's the fact that Daniel is nothing but a haram police, right? And I see this comment a lot, and I'm a little bit conflicted because I know that from Islam, Allah requires us to advise each other, enjoin good and forbid evil. This is a part of the deen. There's no denying that. But then I see a lot of these haram police online that they're just keyboard warriors. I'm sure you get these comments too. Like, I kid you not, let me just scroll if I can find it. Someone literally commented on this. Like, we haven't even been live for more than like 30 minutes at that point. And we, let me just see if I can find this, this comment. It was, let me see. Okay, I can't find it. But someone was basically saying, you brothers are munafiq, you need to grow your beards out. And I'm just like, bro, it hasn't even been 30 minutes yet. Subhanallah. So there's like these keyboard warriors. It's like they advise in a way where there's no adab. From what's apparent, they don't look like they're doing it sincerely. And Sunny Faz, I'm sure you know Sunny Faz. He's a new Muslim. Allahumma barik. He came out and he basically this was his message recently. I want you to tell me what you think about this.
Like, you're gonna rack up sins for this song, and it's like, okay, bro, but how about chill out, man? Just chill out. No, seriously though, like, just chill out, because it's like, I know I'm not here saying music isn't haram.
Yeah.
I'm not even here to try to change the rules, but I've given up drinking, smoking, lusting,
MashaAllah,
lowering my gaze, like practicing hitting 5 prayers a day on time. And when I'm talking to non-Muslims, and I'm still talking about God, and then there's a song in my short film, and you're tweaking. It's like, brother, worry about yourself, man. Like, any practicing Muslim that's on his stuff isn't in there in the comments like that.
Yeah, God knows best. God knows best. And you know, at the end of the day,
and it's like, in Islam, you're not supposed to be out here judging other people like that.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Because a lot of people are just, they're saying that there's no need for advising one another. Just mind you, I'm on my journey. Don't judge me. A lot of Muslims use this to hijabi influencers. I'm sure you've heard it. It's between me and Allah. Don't worry about it. So where do you fall into this?
It's just a function of being online. It's just a function of social media. Like, you're going to get criticized, and why are these influencers just more sensitive about Islamic criticism? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure before he was a Muslim, you get criticism. Oh, your hair is ugly. Oh, I don't like, the way you pluck your eyebrows. I don't like your shirt. Oh, your voice sounds really stupid. You sound gay or whatever. Like that's the nature of online, like being an influencer. You're constantly going to be criticized. But if that's like really getting in your head and disturbing you, then you can't really be online anyway, right? So why is he sensitive to Muslim criticism? That's the first point that can be made. You have to just have a thicker skin. The fact that he understands, okay, fine, I'm not trying to change the religion. That's good. That's good. But you should, when you get criticism that you know is right, don't let your ego get in the way. Because there's this problem psychologically that people have, and it's a product of the modern world. Guilt. When you feel guilty about something, you feel guilty about yourself, you have regret. There is a healthy way to deal with guilt, and there's an unhealthy way to deal with guilt. You have to deal with it one way or another because it's just disturbing to feel bad about yourself. It can cause depression after a while if you don't deal with it. But there's a healthy way to deal with it and an unhealthy way to deal with it. The healthy way to deal with it is to realize that, yeah, I have made mistakes. I am a bad person. That's true. But I'm a slave of Allah. I'm a slave of Allah, and I turn to Him and ask for His forgiveness, and I make tawbah. And Allah, please forgive me for my sins. Please do not burn me in your fire. I don't deserve to be saved. I don't deserve all these blessings that you're constantly giving me. I don't deserve it. So please forgive me, Allah. Please forgive me and save me, because I'm in need of your salvation. That's a healthy way to deal with guilt. But the guilt is never going to go away. That feeling of being sinful is never going to go away. That's a good thing. That's healthy. If you don't feel that, if you don't feel sinful, if you don't feel guilty, that's actually a bad sign. That's actually dangerous. If you think you're good, if you think, no, I'm great, I'm a good person, of course Allah loves me, of course God likes me, I'm good, of course I'm going to go straight to the paradise, straight to Jannah, that's bad. That's very bad. That's a very bad state to be in. You don't want to ever be in that state. You want to always be in a genuine state of regret over your sins and feelings of guilt. You always want to be in that state, but you have to deal with that guilt. And how do you deal with that? You continuously turn to Allah. You continuously ask for forgiveness. And this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his habit, he was saying, I'm asking Allah for forgiveness 100 times a day. And that's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who isn't doing sins like we're doing sins. So what about us? How many times are we turning to Allah in a given day? And when you look at the Sahaba as well, some of the great Sahaba, like Omar, for example, radiallahu anhum. And Omar is known that he was very worried about being a munafiq. And how can Omar be concerned about being a munafiq? One of the greatest companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when Omar goes down one path, like one street, Shaitan goes down and turns around and goes on a different street. That's Omar. How can he be worried, about his station and his rank? But he was. He was not because he had doubts about Islam, not because he had major sins, not because of anything like that, but because that is his state, like that is his level of taqwa, level of concern and God consciousness and fear of Allah, that he's always wanting to know. And the Prophet ﷺ has said that nifaq, like hypocrisy, like this disease of hypocrisy, sometimes it can be very subtle. It can be very small and unnoticeable, very unnoticeable, like a black ant on a black rock in the middle of a moonless night. You know, that's how subtle hypocrisy can be, nifaq can be. And nifaq is something that can destroy you, can destroy your iman. So that causes us to be constantly vigilant, constantly examining ourselves, examining our hearts. And this is the example of the greatest awliya and the greatest sahaba, like Umar radiallahu anhu. So then what about us? And what about us poor slaves? So that's a healthy way to deal with guilt. The unhealthy way, the destructive way to deal with guilt is that, yeah, okay, stop judging me. Okay, maybe I didn't do the best thing, the right thing. Well, how do we even know that this is a sin? Like, how do we even know that music is haram? How do we even know that drinking and smoking is haram? How do we even know that, mixing with the opposite sex is haram? How do we even know that, actually? That's not, you must be like some kind of extremist, judgmental haram police for you to think that these things are wrong. Actually, there's no problem here. I'm not wrong. I'm right. It's you who's wrong. That's a destructive way to deal with guilt. Because when you look at sins, like we're sinners, right? We are sinners, and we commit sins, and that's why we don't necessarily, like, we do have that husn al-dhan of other Muslims, because these sins are hidden. These sins, we're not doing them publicly. They're hidden sins, and we're not, and we know that we're not supposed to advertise our sin. We're not supposed to talk about our sins. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that that Allah will forgive sins except for the sinner who sins at night, and in the morning he goes and announces it and broadcasts it. He goes around and he tells people that, oh yeah, this is what I did. Because the psychology, look, someone who is openly talking about the sins that they committed, they don't have regret, they don't have any shame, and so they're fine with openly talking about it. So that's the unhealthy way to deal with guilt. It's like an ego defense mechanism. You want to preserve your own ego. You want to preserve your own sense of righteousness. So instead, you attack Islam. You change the deen, or you attack other Muslims. You label them and smear them, and, oh, you're haram police. I don't care what you have to say.
Yeah, there's
deal
a big
with guilt in a healthy way.
Absolutely, bro. There's a big thing that I tell people. It's like the truth doesn't necessarily have to be something that you agree with. If you necessarily vibe with it, cool. But if you don't, doesn't mean that it's untrue. Doesn't mean that what you think in your internal schema in your mind is objective reality, so to speak. So I did want to, conclude this segment at least and say, may Allah make it easy for all the reverts too. Like Brother Sunny. And it's something that we all go through, but there's a need for this. And many times, adab, of course, it's important. No one's denying it. Sheikh Albani mentioned that the truth is hard as it is. Don't make it harder with your bad manners and etiquette. So it's absolutely important to realize how we do things. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he had the utmost character and adab, right? But at the end of the day, he's still enjoined good and forbid evil. There's one thing that you mentioned too that I want to touch on. You mentioned that, the thing about airing sins and concealing your sins, when we have inward sins too, when we have personal private sins, like you missing Fajr, or you relapsing on nofap, or you doing anything that's between you and Allah, no one knows about it, of course. But there are some sins that genuinely involve the community, right? Generally involve things that are bigger than just you and Allah. They're things that are bigger than just between you and Allah. They involve other people, sometimes, let's say, kids, sometimes oppression against people. And there's a certain group of people that just go and take this above and beyond. They'll say, oh, brother, conceal your sins, don't expose this. And there's been a lot of these things that have been coming out. And my question to these people would be, many of these sins, in the Sharia is 100 lashes outside in public. So not all sins are just taken without context to be concealed. It depends on the sin itself. that we got to keep in mind. I do want to touch on this one thing that's been going around recently about Elon Musk too, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So Elon Musk, obviously bought X, and he's on this whole, guys, we have to, restore freedom of speech, censorship, all this. But now he seems like he has a very unilateral, disproportionate bias against Muslims. And he's been obviously for the last few months, but now recently he's been going crazy with all this new recent UK allegations against Muslims. Do you have any thoughts on Elon recently?
Yeah, I did a live stream just earlier today on Elon. And yeah, he's just mask off. He's starting to attack Muslims nonstop on this so-called grooming gangs. But he's going beyond that. He's saying that Muslims, like these Sharia courts, like this Sharia infiltration of the West, and we have to really look more carefully at what these Muslim immigrants are doing. So it's just really and it's a distraction because he was exposed. He was pretending when he was supporting Donald Trump that he just has a problem with immigration in general. So he is pushing this kind of populist narrative like, oh, I just want, to limit immigration or end immigration because I'm so concerned about the native populations in the West. But then in Christmas, like he exposed himself. He said that, no. When I say I'm against immigration, I meant immigration of everyone except Indians. I want more Indians to immigrate. I want more H-1B visas to be granted to Indians because these are, elite human capital. These are the geniuses in India. These Hindu geniuses are tech geniuses. They're going to come. America needs these geniuses to stay competitive in the global market. So we have to open the gates for these Hindus to come in. So then all of these MAGA fans, Donald Trump fans, they're like, wait. We're anti-immigration, period. Not just anti-immigration except for Hindus. That's not what we signed up for. So there's a huge backlash against Elon Musk. And he was getting ratioed. Like the owner of Twitter was getting ratioed on his own platform by people. And he had a meltdown. Like he was, dropping F-bombs. He was really angry, tweeting like a madman. And then suddenly he shifted his focus and started attacking Muslims. He started saying, oh, look at these immigrant Muslims, look at these groomers. And he dug up this whole case of from 2013 of the grooming gangs in the UK. So it's just a psyop. It's just to distract from the fact that he's inconsistent or that he's actually pro-immigration because he's a globalist, a neoliberal globalist, but he wants to present himself as some kind of conservative populist, anti-immigration populist when that's not really what he is.
Absolutely. There's one question that I wanted to ask you before we jump into the next topic as well. And you mentioned this a lot about us having the Quran and Sunnah, us having the objective standard from Allah. So how can Muslims, us as the Ummah, switch from always being in the defense to now having the moral high ground, which we actually do when it comes to facing progressiveness, free Western values, especially when they use shaming tactics? So one thing that I noticed is when you did that debate with Apos, I don't mind calling him that, and even though he gets triggered at that, when you made that debate with Apos and many other liberal, even Quranists, right? You are unapologetically unashamed to stand for what Allah and His Messenger ﷺ stand for and what is clear in the text. Whereas many Muslims, unfortunately, they feel like when I'm talking to my coworkers or when I'm faced with some backlash or criticism, I don't know what to say because the terminology alone almost makes us seem like we're extreme or old-fashioned or barbaric, especially living in the West. So as somebody who is living in America like yourself, what is your advice to the Muslims living in the West for us to reclaim that narrative, to gain that upper hand and really embrace the moral high ground that we have been granted by Allah?
The best approach that I've taken over the years, I think it's the best approach, is to just point to the problems that Westerners are really suffering from. There is an economic depression that is looming large in the West. People are suffering on many different levels. The marriages are breaking down. 50% of people under 30 are never going to get married. Like, that's a crazy statistic. Like 50% or more. The fertility rate is dropping because people aren't having children. Like, these populations can't even sustain themselves. But you, like, personally, like, if you're living in the West, it doesn't really matter if you're Muslim or non-Muslim. Like, there's not really, like, there's a low chance that you're going to get married. There's a low chance that you're going to be able to have a family. There's almost a zero chance that you're going to be able to buy a house. There's zero chance that you're going to be out of debt if you go to college. There's a very high chance that you're going to be bankrupted by medical care costs. That might be because you're paying premiums for your insurance, health insurance, or it might be because you don't have adequate insurance and they pull your coverage at the last minute and you're saddled with a huge bill that you can't pay off, so you have to go into debt. So this is like a nightmare. Like, this is a dystopia that most people are living, and oftentimes they don't even realize that they're living it. Why? Because they're medicated. Essentially, they're on antidepressants, or they're just numbing their senses through drugs and alcohol, weed, or through video games and constant, like, dopamine hits through social media. So they've just been numb to a kind of reality. Pornography, obviously, they can't feel the bitterness or the sting of not being able to get married because there's this artificial replacement of pornography. They can't really feel the sting of being lonely and childless, as a wine mom, for example, like a cat lady, because they're on antidepressants. So these technologies are taking the sting out of this dystopia, so you don't even recognize that you're in a dystopia. Pointing out these things and then showing how Islam provides an alternative. Islam provides a very clear path to a traditional society, traditional families. The blueprint is all there. The blueprint is all there, and that's something that Christianity can't offer, something that Judaism can't offer, Hinduism can't offer, Buddhism can't offer. Your only choice is really Islam, to have like a really tangible blueprint for how to turn the ship around. And I think that is a very effective way to call people to Islam. It wakes people up. First of all, you shake people out of their complacency to realize how bad things are around you. And then when you realize that, then you're looking for a solution, like who can offer a solution, and that's where you present Islam.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Barakallah feek. Speaking of which, there's one thing that you don't hesitate on providing this solution, telling Muslims as it is on the internet, right? A lot of people have shamed you as a misogynist, women hater, oppressive, tyrant. And there's a lot of truth with what you say to women about chasing traditional values, and to men too. But there have been, unfortunately, a lot of sisters that have taken the traditional route. I'm not going to say everybody, because the way that you speak about, for example, Muslims should be healthy, right? And now, oh, brother, what if they have a thyroid condition? It's like, bro, not everybody has a thyroid condition, right? Oh, what if this happens? It's like, listen, by and large, Allah will protect you, of course. However, there are some Muslimas, that they took the traditional route. They got married young. They didn't chase the dunya. They didn't chase the credentials. And now they have been left for exploitation, left without protection, left to fend for themselves. I kid you not. Working minimum wage jobs with kids. I'm not saying that it's as common as a lot of these statistics have made it out to be in the comment section with this toxicity, but it has happened. And simply saying, oh, the Sharia should be there, right? Or if Muslim men were fulfilling their roles, that this would have never happened to you. That's not the reality of a lot of sisters that are actually now here left to fend for themselves. No matter how much we as men could say that the Sharia should be there, your wali should take you back, many times this doesn't happen in reality. What would you say for these cases?
I just don't understand the logic. I have a hard time. It might be just the difference between the way men think and the way women think. You can think of all kinds of bad outcomes and disasters no matter what decision you make. Like if you are a teenage Muslim woman and you're deciding, should I get married and start a family and have kids, or should I go to college? Either of those options, there's a lot of disasters that can take place. There's a lot of disasters that could potentially destroy your life or cripple you, no matter what decision that you take. You decide to go the traditional route, and then your husband dies. You decide to go to the traditional route, and your husband divorces you, leaving you as a single mom. You decide to go the college route. You go to college, and then you lose your Islam, or you get, raped, or you get, maybe a professor takes advantage of you, or maybe you get taken advantage of in the dorm, or maybe you get seduced by a non-Muslim in your class, and then he takes advantage of you and divorces you. You get married, and then you get divorced, and you get alienated from your entire family because he wasn't a Muslim. You can think of an infinite number of disasters and problems with any given scenario. So then you'll be crippled. You won't be able to make a decision. But that's not how you rationally are supposed to evaluate potentialities. You have to look at what is more likely.
Right.
What is more likely to happen? What is relatively less likely? What has a low chance of happening? What has a higher chance of happening? And then you weigh those odds, you weigh those potentials, and that's how you get a rational decision that is best for you. So bringing up exceptional cases, or bringing up just any possibility, any negative possibility, and that's the way that their minds work, because they're culturally, and not just women, men here too, culturally, the idea of being a traditional mom and living a traditional family has been so stigmatized that there are all of these negative possibilities that immediately come to mind. But those same possibilities, much worse, can happen if you don't take the traditional route. You go and you study and you waste like the most fertile years of your life. Your youth is being wasted in a college program. Then you go do your master's degree. Then you go do your PhD. Then you don't want to get married because that's a waste of a degree. You go work. And then you're 40 years old and you can't find anyone to marry you. You're just by yourself. You don't have kids, no prospects, and you're going to die alone. Have you thought of that possibility? Because that's a very high chance that if you go down this route, that's going to be your end. And if you don't believe me that that's a very high chance, just look at how a lot of these lonely women, they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and they're constantly posting about, I made a mistake, or maybe they won't admit it. They'll say, look, I'm suffering. I'm by myself. It's there for you to see. Like, you can calculate. Like, you've just put aside all of the feminist brainwashing, put aside all of the propaganda, and look at things in an objective way. And if you do that, you'll see that the odds, like, you're not playing the odds when you go and pursue this kind of modern boss babe, liberated woman route. You're not playing the odds. And no amount of anecdotal evidence or exceptional cases or these kinds of nightmare scenarios that you're dreaming up, no amount of that is going to change the objective odds, right? And at a certain point, you have to trust Allah. Like, you have to trust that even if you go the traditional route and your husband dies or he divorces you and he turns out to be a jerk, you make your decisions on the basis of, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. I'm doing this for the sake of following the sunnah, following the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba and the Salaf. Like, when you make that intention, you have to have tawakkul. You have to rely on Allah. That even if the worst scenario happens to you, the absolute worst scenario happens to you, you have taken hold of the firmest handhold, which is belief in Allah, taqwa in Allah, that Allah is not going to abandon you. That is the kind of tawakkul that you need, despite all of these trials and tribulations of dunya and life. I'm not guaranteeing anyone that if you choose to do something fi sabilillah for the sake of Allah, nothing bad is going to happen to you in the dunya. Obviously, bad things are happening to some of the greatest awliya, some of the best people that have been created, the anbiya, the prophets. They were the most tested. They suffered the most loss. They suffered the most death and destruction. But their position with Allah and in the akhirah was guaranteed. Like, that's the kind of mindset you have to have.
Yeah. There's a comment that I wanted to touch on. The trick is to do what is most likely to please Allah and accept whatever results give you, whatever results Allah gives you. See, what you were saying is true. If you follow Allah and you follow the Quran and Sunnah and you don't do any haram, then if a calamity befalls you, it's genuinely qadar Allah. It's genuinely your test, right? But to try to now avoid doing the right thing in the case something bad happens, it's like, what's the point of that? You know, many people, they sometimes do sins and then they get into a calamity itself, maybe because of the sin, and you'll always wonder, if I did this to myself. You know, many times we do things to ourselves, we transgress against Allah, and something bad happens to us, and now we're left wondering, damn, did this really just happen to me because of what I did to myself with my own two hands? Is this my doing? Is this my punishment? Is this my expiation now? Whereas you don't have to play these mental mind games and wonder if something came your way because of your own doing, if you obeyed Allah in the first place. Because if something still bad happens to you, then khalas, it's qadar Allah, it's your test. I wanted to touch on this super chat from brother Mustafa. I heard and saw, he said, referring to Tate, I am Muslim when I'm in Dubai and Christian when I'm in Romania. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a bad statement. So, and I don't know if he actually said that. If he said it, like, then that's a statement of kufr. But that's the thing that people should realize. Someone can make a statement of kufr, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a kafir. And this is something that scholars like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah have said, and Imam al-Ghazali have said, and many have said. I had an entire debate on this topic, on the issue of takfir. And you can watch it on my channel, Muslim Skeptic. But just because you're making a statement that is kufr, that doesn't mean that you are a kafir. Why? Because you might be ignorant. This is known as the excuse of ignorance, al-udhr bil-jahl. You might be ignorant, or there could be another excuse, like a legitimate excuse, that, yeah, you said kufr, or you've done something that's kufr, but it's not necessarily that you have left Islam. To leave Islam, leaving Islam means to, where it's clear cut, is someone says that the Prophet ﷺ has lied. To say that the Prophet ﷺ has lied about something, or the Prophet was wrong about something, that is kufr. That's clear cut kufr, and there is no excuse for that, because you're directly saying the Prophet ﷺ has lied.
Yeah.
But most of the kufr, you can still make a kufr statement. But because of your ignorance, you don't realize that that kufr statement amounts to saying that the Prophet ﷺ lied. You don't recognize it because you're ignorant, or you haven't drawn you haven't made the connection. Like, for example, someone can say that, well, there is no inheritance laws in Islam. Allah hasn't told us how to give away our wealth in death. Allah hasn't said anything about that. That's a statement of kufr, because obviously the Quran has laws on inheritance, but you just might not have read the Quran. You're a Muslim, but you haven't read the Quran. You haven't heard of this, so you're ignorant. So what you have said implies that the Prophet ﷺ has lied, because you're saying that, oh, the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah requires you to follow inheritance laws, and these are the ayat, and you're basically saying, no, the Prophet is wrong, but you don't realize that that's the implication of what you're saying, because you're ignorant. So therefore, you're not a kafir. That's the way that, like, in a nutshell, how you distinguish between a statement of kufr versus, oh, this person is a kafir.
Very, very well said. There is one last question before we go into the topic of marriage too, because there's a lot of questions for that. But brother Yusuf asks, "Assalamu alaikum, bros. How do I get that jacket?"
This jacket is hoodie, is a courtesy. It was a gift given to me by Queens College MSA. So shout out to the bros in Queens College. Like I have given a few talks at Queens College, and they suffered like a lot of heat for that too. They were like
Wow.
attacked by the university president. Like they were being called anti-Semites. The campus Jews and Zionists were, attacking them nonstop. So, but they gave me this really nice hoodie, and I wanted to wear it. So, because it's cold
Shout
here.
out to Queens College.
Yeah.
May Allah bless them. There's okay, so here's my next question. I have this noted down because it's a question that a lot of brothers have been asking, but somebody commented this here too, so I'll put this up. But essentially the question is, how can you protect your family, i.e., wife, daughters? I know you don't have any daughters, but still, how do you protect them from human waswas, human bad influence? Maybe it's the family, maybe it's the friends, maybe it's their own parents. Sometimes trying to convince her that the grass is greener on the other side, that there's another lifestyle you could be living instead of this traditional life that your husband wants you to live. What would you say to that? Obviously, it's easier said than done to just, hey, just keep your wife in check. Of course, we all got to do that. But what about to the brothers that have wives that they don't have that dynamic to? They can't, or at least shouldn't, just be prescriptively told to divorce them. What about if they both got married and they weren't on deen? Now they're getting on deen. Maybe he's getting on deen first, a little bit earlier. So he has to have that rahmah dealing with her. Maybe he wants to play the long game. What advice would you just say, to the men that are going through this?
No, the number one factor is, are you really the man of the house? The number one factor is, are you the teacher of your wife? Does your wife look at you with respect and with that kind of love and admiration, and she sees you as the leader, and she trusts you, and she is following your lead? If that's not the case, then you have bigger problems than who your wife's friends are. Like that, you have much bigger problems. That is the first thing that is required. Your wife has to really look up to you, depend on you. She has to, adore you in that kind of way. She has to listen to you. She has to want to listen to you. So once you have that kind of relationship, and how do you develop that relationship? That's a whole separate conversation. But then it becomes not easy, but it becomes more direct. The kinds of steps that you can take in a very rahmah, merciful way to guide her, to nudge her in the right direction. Because you're not going to have her go cold turkey. Oh, you can't have any friends. Rather, you just say, oh, you're going out with them again, or oh, you're going there. They're kind of messed up. Like maybe you're going to be a little bit more indirect. Maybe you're going to tell her, oh, I know some really nice family friends, or oh, my best friend has a wife that really wants to meet you, or like that's how you bring these other influences socially into her life, just in a kind of indirect way. So you're slowly kind of removing or getting her like to not feel so positively about a certain group of friends and reorienting her towards better influences socially. And sometimes that takes time. Sometimes it requires moving. Like sometimes you might have to move out of a certain location. Definitely online activity is also important. Like what group chats is she a part of? What kind of websites is she frequenting? What kind of YouTube videos are she watching? Like, who are her favorite sheikhs and du'at? Like, what is she listening to? And you can just very gently, very kindly, mercifully guide her to better options slowly, so that she won't even necessarily notice it. And that will pay off dividends over time, because it's one of the worst influences. As soon as your wife is interacting with divorced women, that's a huge red flag, because divorced women, they love company. Misery loves company. They are going to be doing this waswas, as you mentioned, in her ear, and your marriage is soon going to be in trouble as well.
Absolutely. Well said. The Prophet also mentioned that you're on the religion of your friends. So it's very important for us and our wives to stay on point with who we allow close to us. there is one more thing that I wanted to put up here. If you ever disagreed with someone, just exchange phones for a day. You will figure out that algorithmic bubble is real. Absolutely, this is very true. Before we go into now the topic of polygyny, because many Muslims have an issue with polygyny, unfortunately, I wanted to put this video up that's going viral, and there's getting a lot of responses to this brother. He's this Christian brother on TikTok, and he made this video against polygyny, and this is what he has to say.
Christian, you're supposed to only have one wife, not four. And there's a really good reason for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this up again. All right, there.
As a Christian, you're supposed to only have one wife, not four. And there's a really good reason for that. But polygamy is seen in the Bible on many occasions. If we look at King Solomon, he had 700 wives. And King Solomon wasn't the only man with multiple wives. Even though these practices are seen in the Old Testament a lot, God does not endorse them as ideal. In fact, God was showing us something. All these scenarios with men having multiple wives always led to complications. Abraham's wife Sarah couldn't bear children, and later she gave Hagar, her maid, to her husband Abraham. But then we see the jealousy that arises from this situation. Sarah mistreats her out of jealousy, and Hagar ends up leaving and running away. Look at Jacob, he had more than one wife and a lot of concubines, and what ended up happening? His life became a mess. King Solomon, his 700 wives led him to worship other foreign gods. Human beings are jealous by nature. The idea of polygamy never works out. One person is bound to be jealous or feel some type of way. It then becomes a competition instead of actual real love. There's a lot of polygamy in the Bible, but it's God's way of showing us that a person's lack of contentment will destroy them.
Where do we start with this?
Well, for starters, if they believe as well that Sulaiman alayhi salam was a prophet, why would he sin in that way, leading to idols?
Well, they have a different conception of prophethood. They don't necessarily see prophets as moral exemplars. So you can't that's how we understand prophets in Islam. Like prophets are meant to be these examples of how to live so they don't commit major sins. They don't make these kinds of blunders. But they don't have that concept within Christianity. That's how basically and in Judaism as well. So they're basically insulting the prophets. They're attacking the prophets in this way. That's part of like the disgusting kufr that you find within these theologies. But I mean, he's just bringing problems within when it comes to polygyny, but you can have problems in monogamy as well. Like marriages break up. Husbands can kill their wives can kill their husbands. Like, oh, I can list a whole long list of potential problems that come from monogamy.
Yeah, like Adam and Hawa, for example, they Adam transgressed. Yeah,
the Bible. Yeah, according to the Bible, she got tricked by the devil, by the serpent, and then she led to his fall, according to the Bible. So this must mean that monogamy is actually fraught. We just need to have like free love, just no marriage. Everyone be free to go with whoever they want, even the same sex. Like, why not? That's the kind of love and peace that Jesus taught. Gay marriage or not marriage. I mean, gay relationships, polyamory. Let's do some lesbianism. Why not? Like, when we read the Bible, even monogamy, there are problems. There are problems, guys.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole theology too of the original sin then comes from monogamy, no? But there's a lot of like logical errors in this.
Imagine, from their perspective, obviously, I'm not saying this actually is the case.
Of course.
But if maybe in a polygynous scenario, if one wife has been deceived and tricked by Satan, then another wife will be able to, counterbalance that. If it was a polygynous situation, right? If you have multiple wives. So, I mean, this is a really low IQ argument, but it's come to be common amongst some of these online Christians.
Absolutely. And all you see in the comments are one of two. You either see a bunch of people promoting Christianity. Oh, this is why, Jesus saved us, and this is why we have not the Muslims, this is why we have salvation. Or you see this other very common, extremely high IQ comment of, why can't a woman have multiple husbands in Islam? Why can't a woman have four husbands? And it's always one or the other of these two variations. But my question to you now is, given that the average IQ of many non-Muslims is such, obviously may Allah guide them to the truth, what advice would you now have to the Muslims, particularly many Muslimas, that say, oh, as soon as you talk about polygyny, the first thing coming out of their mouth is, oh, but he has to be fair, he has to be just. I mean, okay, I don't deny that. Allah already mentions that in the Quran. If you can't be just, don't. But it always has to be, oh, this made more sense back then. There were widows back then. There were divorcees back then. There were, So my whole point is, what advice would you have to non-Muslims, not non-Muslims, astaghfirullah, what advice, I don't want to make takfir now. What advice would you have to many of these liberal Muslimas and Muslims that are falling for this propaganda to the point where, and I don't want to go and make this a fiqh discussion, right? But they're getting to the point of even making a man sign a polygyny contract, a clause on the nikah saying that you can only have me. You can only be monogamous to me. You can't marry another wife. So, what advice would you say to these women first? And then, number two, what advice would you say this to men that are dealing with this as their wife on a personal level? Because I don't want to put you on the spot and be like, what would you tell your wife? But to the men that should be coaching their wife.
The way that you can explain it is, don't you want, like, if you're a woman, like, don't you want to have a husband that is desired by other women? Don't you want to have a husband, like, do you really want to be married to a man that no one else wants? That he's your husband, but no one else wants him? Like, that's how undesirable he is. He doesn't have any kind of qualities that make other women desire him. And when you ask women that, they'll say, no, I want my husband to be desired. I want other women to want him. Okay, well then, if that's the case, the fact that that is a possibility, that is going to do several things. One, it's going to make him, even if he doesn't actually take a second wife, his testosterone is going to be higher. And this is something that has been proven, that within monogamous societies, whenever a man gets married, as soon as he gets married, his testosterone plummets. Like, it just takes a nosedive. And that's why a lot of Muslim men that are living in the West, or just in general, men in general, as soon as they get married, a lot of them start gaining weight. They start gaining weight. They stop. They're less active. There's a big hormonal change that happens to you when you get married. But in polygynous societies, where men have the option, even if they're not polygynous themselves, but it's just an option, it's just something that is there as a possibility, their testosterone stays the same level. Who do you think benefits from that level of testosterone as opposed to plummeted testosterone? Your wife.
Everybody,
Your wife everyone is going to be benefiting from that. So women are shooting themselves in the foot when they insist on this kind of monogamy, this forced monogamy for everyone. And it's actually contrary to their own interests, if they realize it or not. But yeah, the fact that you don't want to be a co-wife, okay, yeah, that's understood. And your husband, shouldn't just throw your wishes in the trash. But, we don't always get whatever we want. As men know this. I would love to have a job that brings me, that's a halal job that brings me all the 6 figures, 7 figures, and I don't have to do anything. Like, it's just passive income. Yeah, I would love that. I would love this and that and the other. So what? So what? Life is about making compromises. Life is about a give and take. And the thing about these women, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be married to the highly desirable man, the Chad. They want to be married to the high earner, the tall, over 6 foot, all of these positive qualities. But they also want him just to be exclusively theirs. So, okay, yeah, maybe some of that can be accommodated. Some of those desires can be accommodated. Maybe not all of them. That's life. That's life. You make the decision. If you don't want your man to be polygamous, if you don't, or polygynous, you want him to have no chance of having a second wife, just marry someone who's short and fat and homeless. Short, fat, homeless, no prospects for anything, any kind of career. Just marry someone like that. Then you'll definitely, he won't be getting a second wife. He definitely won't be cheating on you in any way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it absolutely blows my mind how a lot of women, they don't realize that it's in their nature to be subconsciously always testing men. And a lot of men, which is worse, they don't realize that at all. Their wife tells them to let go of themselves. Oh, you don't have to work as hard. You don't have to take care of your health anymore. You don't have to do all this. And they listen to that. They don't realize that she's just testing to see if you're really that guy that you were when you guys got married. And it's a great reminder to ourselves as men to never, I guess, regress in any way whatsoever, unless obviously there's some legitimate life circumstance, like these comments. Oh, what if he got an injury? What if he's disabled? It's like, okay, I'm not denying that happens, but most men just are not on self-improvement, bro. So it's a very good reminder as well. Is this too personal, or do you want to address this? I don't want to get you in trouble. When is Daniel marrying a second wife?
Allahu alam. Only Allah knows.
Only Allah knows. May Allah give us what's best. Cool. I'm gonna open up the floor to some questions before we wrap up, because I am obviously cognizant of the time. But before that, there's one more question that I would ask you before we go into that. Before we go into the Q&A. And what advice would you have for Muslims going into 2025? Obviously, this is not a Hijri year, right? This is just a new Gregorian year, whatever. Khalas, I know we're not supposed to do New Year's, new me, but it's a new year. A lot of Muslims living in the West are kind of waking up with the da'wah, which is a very good thing. I've seen that a lot of the youth now are showing up to the masjids. A lot of the youth are not even watching, but creating da'wah content, which is good. I think that social media has been utilized effectively, Allahumma barik, as a tool by the Muslim influencers, at least the ones that are using it correctly, to inspire those towards the haqq. What advice would you have to a lot of the Muslims this year that are going into it, maybe trying to better themselves, leaving sins, finally do halal, get married, leave that haram relationship? Maybe it's to finally, leave that haram job. I know a lot of brothers and sisters that are still working in haram jobs. May Allah be easy for them. But what advice would you have?
Self-improvement is always important. You want to make sure that every day is better than the day before. So it doesn't have to matter if it's the beginning of the year or the middle of the year or whenever. That's just a constant mindset that Muslims should have, is self-improvement. What am I doing now to get closer to Allah, to do what's needed for my akhirah, and then also what's needed to improve my dunya as well, and work for your rizq. So I don't know, generic advice I can give you is just that, but more specific things, I think Muslims really should be trying to think in more strategic ways. I think Muslims really should be, just for the sake of the ummah, like, where are we as an ummah? We are seeing these genocides happening, and Muslims are being demonized. We're being killed. We're being ethnically cleansed all over the world. We can't just keep going on in this pattern. Like, we have to start doing things differently and thinking differently, strategizing, and that requires a change in behavior. Otherwise, we're just sheep to the slaughter and nothing is going to change. So I think that Muslims coming together in your own group, like socially, I'm not saying risk your job or go online and start talking in this kind of way, but just in your own WhatsApp groups, private WhatsApp groups, in your own chats, start talking, what do we have to do as an ummah to improve our situation collectively? How do we think more in terms of the ummah and the advancement of the ummah? And how do we throw off these kinds of problematic, backwards thinking, like, oh, we have to appease liberalism, or, oh, we can't be politically incorrect, like, oh, like this kind of defeatist mentality, like, oh, we have to just constantly be simping to this feminist narrative. Like, let's get past that, because I know a lot of people, like a lot of Muslims by now, are like red pilled as far as it goes. Like, they're aware of what red pill is. They know that it's correct. They know that a lot of these criticisms of feminism are correct, that Islam is not feminist. So you know that privately. Maybe you're not brave enough to start talking about it publicly, but at least within your own friend group, like, what can you do in your masjid, like your local masjid, to make it less feminist, to make it less liberal? You might have difficulty doing that on your own, but if you have a friend group and you can strategize and you can think, you can make waves, you can make changes. Like, okay, there's this compassionate sheikha that's coming, that's going to feminize all of the sisters in our masjid. Let's try to block her from coming in, being able to speak at our masjid. Let's try to boycott this event, or let's try to prevent this person from coming and speaking. Things like that. That makes a difference. Like, but it's about taking action, right? It's about planning and strategizing and collectivizing at the local level, making these kinds of decisions instead of just another year of just the same, being losers, being simps, being taken advantage of by whatever psyop the government is going to put out next, because they're constantly putting out these psyops. And unfortunately, it's sad to say, a lot of Muslims are falling for these psyops, hook, line, and sinker. So to change, we have to change our behavior. That's my advice.
Absolutely cool. That's very good. Allahumma barak. Daniel is cooking as usual. Barakallah feek. There's one question that I have received a lot, and it was specifically mentioned to ask you. A bunch of brothers asked this question actually. So, given that as Muslim men, we don't technically have to disclose to our wife when getting a second wife Islamically, a lot of women that are modern and liberal and westernized, they will equate this to cheating, to adultery. Astaghfirullah. There is an element of emotional betrayal that I will legitimize, right? I'm not going to be heartless, and I'm going to say that to an extent, it will feel like betrayal to many women. What advice would you give now to men? I know there's individual differences on a case by case basis, but is this something that you advise men to do? Because many men are saying, they're kind of split. You know, a lot of the men in the sphere are saying, never tell your wife. If she asks you, say no, just do your thing. Other men are saying you should tell them to prevent fitna in the future.
Honestly, I don't have experience, but I wouldn't keep it a secret. I would not. It's gonna blow up in your face, like 100%, 100%, and then you have to deal with that, and it's gonna be messy. It's gonna be like, don't just think of yourself. Yeah, you should be concerned about your wife and her feelings. You should also be concerned about your children. You should be concerned about your in-laws. You should be concerned about your own parents. If you're like a community leader, you have your community to worry about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is all these. So technically, yeah, I 100% agree that when it comes to the fiqh, there is no obligation for you to get approval from your wife, like your first
Mm-hmm.
wife. However, you should make a decision that is going to minimize harm to many different parties involved. And when you keep things a secret and you do this, then it's going to blow up. And is that fair to everyone involved? Like, even putting your wife aside, which you shouldn't, but just put your wife aside. What about your kids? What about your other family members? This is something important. Like, this is something that you should be concerned about. And look, if you're not, and this is what some other people who do have experience with second wives say, like, if you're not man enough to tell her that you're doing this openly, then you're not man enough to have a second wife. That's like another perspective. Like, if you're not man enough to tell her and be open about it, that this is what you want to do and what you're planning to do, then you're not really man enough to have a second wife in the first place. Like, you just have to slink around and you have to do it secretly. Like, that's not very manly now, is it? So these are the kinds of opinions from someone that doesn't have experience with this. So
Absolutely. Barakallah feek.
I just have to speak theoretically.
Honesty is the best policy, as they say. Abdullah Ahmed asks, what's Daniel's advice dealing with the whole sisters putting it in the contract? I'm assuming the monogamy clause.
Yeah, I don't think you should accept that. You need to have just a standard nikah contract, standard aqd. Don't add these feminist restrictions, because here's an idea. Maybe in the future, I mean, the sisters will laugh at this. Or even my own wife watching this will laugh. Like, maybe in the future you'll want him to get a second wife. Maybe in the future you'll actually encourage him, and you want to be, you want a co-wife. Maybe you realize that a lot of the housework is a little too much. A lot of the responsibilities, cooking and cleaning, is a little too much. You need a co-wife. You need a sister wife to help. And think about all the fun that you'll have with your co-wife. You'll be best friends, and it'll just be a grand old time. Or maybe two co-wives, or I mean, two friends, three. It'll just be a nice friend group. So why do you want to restrict yourself from in the future? So don't put that in the contract. Don't restrict your future self. Your future self is going to kick you. Why did I insist on monogamy? Why did I insist on having that in the contract? Because now I really want to have that co-wife, but I can't, because now it's in the contract. And if he does it, then we'll be divorced. I don't want that to happen. Irrevocably divorced, maybe. So I'm kicking myself. Stupid. When I was in my youth, I wanted to be in a monogamous relationship, but now I realize the beauty and the joy of polygyny, but I can't do it. So I'm warning. This is a warning. This is a this is a public service announcement. Be careful, sisters. You don't want to make a huge mistake by putting that in the contract.
Absolutely. You never know. People change, bro. I mean, just look at ourselves like 5 years ago. We probably don't have the same values and views and perspectives that we do now. Abdullah asked another question. Daniel, advise what we should look for in a spouse and signs to look for if she is the one. Well, I don't even believe in that, but go on, bro.
Yeah, I think that the signs are given by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A woman is married for 4 reasons: her beauty, her lineage, her wealth, and her deen. So marry for deen, and then you'll be blessed. So that's the advice, and it's very clear. Like, if you don't marry for religion, you're going to regret it, because your kids are going to be less religious because of that. You're going to be less religious because of that. And when someone is already not very religious, then there's no guarantee that they're going to become even less religious over time. In fact, you might expect, like, someone, as they get older, they could become less religious. So if she's already not very religious and she gets less religious, God forbid, Allah forbid that, she might even leave Islam, or she might, completely abandon the deen. So you have to take that advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam very, very seriously. The typical advice that's given is, okay, look for women that you're attracted to for marriage. You're attracted to her physically, and then investigate. Is she religious? If she's not, then drop her. Then don't pursue it further. That way you're leaving someone for the sake of religion, for the sake of they don't have the deen, and that's better, as opposed to finding someone who is religious. Their deen is very good, but you're not attracted to them. So then you abandon them because you're not attracted to them. You like don't pursue them further. That's not the best. Like you want to have the right reasons.
Absolutely. Sister Maria asks, how come the Muslim influencers don't practice polygamy? I don't know who she thinks doesn't practice polygamy. Muhammad Abbas, my grandfather had 4 wives. He first got married at 19. No major conflicts whatsoever. What do you think they were doing back then that polygyny didn't cause problems? What do you think was different?
Well, that was the time when men were men. Those were the times when, men were the chads, that we're talking about. They were the chads. And yeah, those women, like my grandfather, for example, he had 2 wives, my grandmother and then his other wife. And he was a chad, like by all accounts. And yeah, I'm sure that, my grandmother and his other wife, they were on good terms. And the story is that it was my grandmother that encouraged him to actually get a second wife.
Wow, Allah Mubarak.
Yeah, because he was had to travel for business and he was in a different city half of the month. So she said, why don't you get a second wife and then she can take care of you when you're in that other city?
Subhanallah.
That's what he did.
Wow.
But that kind of mentality comes from he's such a chad, like hypergamy again, like he is such a strong man that his wives just loved him that much. Like they loved him that much. They depended on him that much. And that creates a kind of attachment and affection where, yeah, you're jealous as a wife that he has a second wife, but he's worth it. Like he's that much worth it. So that's the other problem that comes when you kind of create equality within society and men and women are basically at the same level of status, basically at this. And because so many men are suffering from low testosterone, low T, men are even physically closer to the level of women in physical stature.
Wow.
There's not, the hypergamy has been destroyed. So a lot of women barely have any attraction to an average guy. And these women, they're not even attracted to having one husband, let alone a husband that's gonna also have like a second wife. That's the problem. Like, so when you go back in time when there's more hypergamy and you have this much larger difference between men and women, then more polygyny is going to be tolerated. That's the big difference, I think.
Absolutely, bro. May Allah protect us from that. Let me go ask the next question. So Marcus asks, Salam, and we'll just blast through the last few before we wrap up. Please ask Daniel, if a revert man come from a terrible, broken Islamophobic family, how should he tell her dad during the marriage process? I feel he will reject immediately.
Why? Just because you have a bad family?
If a revert man come from a terrible, bad Islamophobic family, how should he tell her dad during the marriage process? Oh, so I feel like when you talk to the wali, he will want to meet your family, but your family is not even supportive of Islam or the courtship process or that. So it's like, if you're coming from that process, wouldn't you advise that there's no need for that in the first place because you're a man?
Yeah, I don't think that's it. It might be like a deal breaker for some families.
Some families, yeah.
But a lot of families, it won't be a deal breaker. And the advice, yeah, you should, when you're like, if I have a daughter and I want to find her a good husband, of course I'm going to look at the family. But that's less of a concern than if I'm looking for a wife for my son. Because a woman is going to be much more affected by her family than a guy is. So it's less relevant. If you're a guy and you're coming from an Islamophobic or bad family, what are you bringing to the table? Like, what are you bringing in terms of your deen, in terms of your practice, in terms of your, are you in shape? Are you working hard? Are you making money? Are you, those factors are going to be much more relevant and important in convincing a woman's father, a Muslim woman's father, that you're a suitable match and you're a good potential husband, that's more relevant.
Absolutely. There's a question from a sister. So whose fault is it? Is it the man's fault for not being a Chad? I just want to get clarification, not a pushback. There's another similar question: why men changed? Did women become more masculine, or men became more feminine, or both?
Both.
What would you say? Both?
Yeah, it's both. Like, this is something proven. The testosterone levels of men have been steadily decreasing. Like, the average 20-year-old guy today has the T levels of a 65-year-old.
Wow.
Like, from 30 years ago. Like, that's it's quite shocking how much testosterone has dropped. And it could be from different factors. It could be something due to the environment, like maybe there are more plastics in the environment, maybe there are more plastics in people's clothing, and that can affect your hormonal levels. It could be something to do with the drinking water. It could be something to do also with just gender roles, because your roles, like the kind of behaviors that you do in your life, that affects your hormones. So if you're living a very sedentary life, your testosterone is going to drop. And when people are sitting in front of a screen, your testosterone is going to drop. Also, if you are acting more feminine because, like, you are a simp, like you're simping more, literally, that will lower your testosterone levels. Like, if you're a husband, and this was a study that was actually done. You are a husband and you are changing diapers and you are putting your children to bed for bedtime and you are washing the dishes and you're doing the laundry, your testosterone is going to drop. Imagine that. So it's men's testosterone is decreasing. Women's testosterone is going up because they're taking more manly roles, like they're being the providers in their families. So that those behaviors affect their testosterone levels. They're going up. They're more competitive, and that's what causes like the marital conflict. Because if you have the healthy, correct hormonal levels, the man has very high testosterone. He's going to be with everything that comes with that. And his wife is going to be more passive. She's going to be more agreeable. She's going to have lower testosterone levels. But now everything has evened out. So you have two guys basically in a marriage. Like, every marriage is now gay marriage because of higher testosterone. And they're constantly fighting. Like, you're constantly competing with your wife because your wife is a boss babe, right? So she wants to advance in her career. She wants to be, dominant. Like, oh, don't tell me what to do. I can make my own decisions. I have my own friends. I have my own money. You're competing with your wife. It's like a gay marriage. It's a gay marriage. It's not going to work out. And yeah, so who's at fault? It's not like just one sex. It's not men or women. It's just a confluence of many different factors that affect these kinds of hormonal levels.
So there's a question. What about doing hijrah from feminist societies and getting married? Do you support the passport bros movement? Do you support going abroad, finding these good sisters because there are none in the West, as they quote?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you should definitely look into. I think that it might be smart for some of these brothers, especially if you want to be polygynous, you want to have multiple wives. Then if you're going to bring a higher salary, like you are able to work remotely, you're bringing a Western salary, and you're going to some of these other countries, Muslim countries around the world where they're developing countries, or maybe there's higher poverty levels, you will be able to have a very nice, happy marriage with women in those countries, Muslim women. So yeah, it's something to consider. It's something that might work out very well, especially if you want a second wife, because again, it's all about the hypergamy. So when there is a much larger gap in status between husband and wife, that's when polygyny becomes a possibility, a real possibility. And that's going to be you're going to have much higher chance of success with that if you're a passport bro.
Absolutely. I want to address one question here, but before that, I'm going to quickly go over the super chat. I'm from North Africa, and they implemented laws to rip the husband of money in divorce. Pretty much what's happening here in the West, and a lot of feminist laws against men and women, or men in Islam. What to do? What would you say?
I don't know. Like, what can you do? Like, this is the nightmare that people are living in. Like, this is the world that we're in. So
Absolutely.
without knowing like more details about you personally, I can't really give you specific advice. But yeah, are people getting divorce raped? Yeah. Like, are Muslim men getting divorce raped in Muslim countries? Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
This is what we're warning you about. Like, this is what we're warning all of these people. So this brother in North Africa, everyone who's not married should look at what's going on. Like, it's not even just a Western problem. This is even affecting some of the most traditional societies now are adopting these feminist principles. You're not safe anywhere you go. And this is the condition that needs to be changed. How do we change our condition? How do we change the system within these Muslim countries? We have to call for Sharia. We have to call for a return to Islamic values, Islamic laws of marriage and divorce. That's what we have to be advocating for. But if you want to just live a standard life and go with the flow, then expect to face the same disasters and the same nightmares that everyone else has to face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, if you want to wrap up, you let me know. But Yusuf asked, what do you recommend for our sons living in the West? Obviously, limiting electronics, implementing Quran and Sunnah, anything else. Obviously, for you as a father of sons, Allahumma barik, what would you say?
Well, make sure your kids aren't in public school or any of these schools that, even it could be an Islamic school, but it's unregulated. The kids, like the teachers, you don't necessarily know who the teachers are, who the kids are. Like, it's just a big class. Like, avoid that. Homeschool your kids. That is the biggest ticket, inshallah, for success.
Inshallah. I mean, Marcus asks, which country has the best combination of traditional on-deen wives and also easy to bring her over to the West and get her a visa or passport or something?
It's not like your mentality, like the passport bro that I was talking about earlier. He's not bringing the wife back to the US or back to the West. He's leaving her there. He's leaving her there and he's visiting. Either he's spending a lot of time in that country or he's relocating to that country. Making hijrah. He's not actually bringing her back. As soon as you bring her back, then all bets are off. All bets are off. You don't know like what she's going to become a feminist maybe. Especially if you're going to be out going to work. She doesn't have her family around her. What kind of socializing is she going to do? Who is she going to socialize with?
SubhanAllah. Very well put.
I don't know if that's a good idea.
Absolutely. Would you consider Russia to be a future or even present ally of Islam and Muslims?
Any country can be a future ally. Like, there's always the potential. So, like, more specifically, Russia, it would be good if Russia can serve as a counterweight to US and Israeli influence. So I think that a lot of Muslim countries should be looking for alliances with BRICS, with Russia, China, in order to offset or counterbalance the influence of the US and Israel, because the US and Israel have a long history of genociding Muslims, of forcing Muslims to adopt liberalism and feminism and meddling in Muslim societies, social engineering Muslim societies, whereas Russia and China don't really have that same dimension of their relationships with Muslim countries or any country.
What about like the Uyghurs?
Yeah, again, with any kind of alliance that you make with any country, it's not going to be 100% on the basis of, oh, this country has never done anything against Muslims. So all of these countries, these Muslim countries, have alliances with the United States, for example, or China or Russia. There is no option. Like, it's a darura. It's a necessity that if you don't, you're potentially going to be completely wiped out and destroyed. Even the most principled Muslim countries and the most principled governments, like in Afghanistan, even they have these deals and alliances with China.
Yeah.
For example, the question, it's always a practical question. It's all about real politique, and you have to do, when it comes to siyasa, when it comes to politics and making alliances, it is a cost-benefit analysis. It is about what is the maslaha and what is the mafsada. There's no problem in doing cost-benefit analysis when it comes to siyasa. The problem with reformists and some of this wasatiyah movement that I discuss in other streams is that they try to do that with the requirements of Islam. Like they try to do cost-benefit analysis like, oh, well, do we have to really ban riba? Because, we're going to benefit a lot if we make riba halal and we start taking out loans and we start doing this venture capitalist financing. It's going to be really great. Like there's so many benefits. So we have to reform Islam to make riba halal. That cost-benefit analysis is not allowed because now you're getting into the halal and the haram and the hudud of Allah, the limits that are placed by Allah. But when it comes to siyasa, it's understood. All of the fuqaha agree that when it comes to the decisions that the emir makes, then that it's a different realm. It's a different realm, and maslaha comes into play.
Absolutely. One sister commented that sounds like if men were really prepared, knowledge and financially, their wives and kids wouldn't have to work outside or in mixed environments or put kids in daycare and public schools. Absolutely. That's why most of the advice that at least me on my channel I preach to is to the men, to the Muslim men.
Yeah, I agree.
Ask Daniel if someone marries the wrong person but is too naive to leave them now. After 5 to 6 years, now they have 3 kids, the wife is devilish, what to do because divorcing will impact the 3 children.
What to do?
That's tough, bro.
Yeah, there could be many possibilities. How devilish are we talking? Like, is this someone who's completely irredeemable? Like, is there something causing her to be devilish? Is a bad influence? Can she be reformed? Can she be positively influenced? Like, maybe the mind shouldn't be going to divorce. You'd have to know more details. But if divorce is an option. Like divorce is an option, but it also depends on where you are. Are you living in the West? Are you living in a country where you could divorce and retain custody of your 3 children? In which case you could, live with your 3 children and your family, like your parents, and they can help raise the 3 children. And there's way too many possibilities to give you practical advice.
Absolutely. Okay. One of the last questions, Daniel, I work way too much because my family's condition is not too well going. I sleep 4 to 5 hours because I work overtime and study at the same time. Am I sinful for putting pressure on myself?
Well, is it required for you to work overtime? Like, why are you studying and working overtime? Studying what?
Yeah, I'm sure he can give more context.
Details.
Yeah, he gave context to the first question, though. He said the wife is devilish because her family is into black magic. She had a lot of warnings, but she didn't listen.
Yeah, well, if that isn't like a knowledge problem, she doesn't know that black magic is haram. If her family is into black magic, are you saying that she's getting possessed by jinn? Is that what you're saying? In which case you need to see a raqi, you need to see someone like an exorcist, Muslim exorcist. But just because her family is into black magic, so what? Cut her off from family that does black magic. No problem.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. Sometimes people put way too much emphasis on, or way too much belief that black magic is going to destroy their entire lives. Black magic can have an effect. Black magic can definitely have a negative effect. That's a reality. But it's not something that is going to be more powerful than something as simple as Surat al-Falaq, Surat al-Nas, like Ayatul Kursi. Ayatul Kursi and Surat al-Falaq and Surat al-Nas and Quran in general is like this nuclear weapon. And black magic is like a knife. Okay. Yeah, a knife can harm you, but if you have nukes, you can just nuke that out of into orbit. It's not a match. Like, these dark forces exist, but they're not a match for your daily prayers, for reciting Quran. And sometimes, yeah, I acknowledge you might need a specialist. Like, you might need a specialist Iraqi that will come and do ruqya using Quran and give you advice. Like, yes, that could be needed for your specific case. But in general, we shouldn't have this big fear of black magic and sihr. Let them do their sihr. Let them do this shirk kind of practice, do their black magic. We have Ayatul Kursi. Like, we have prayers. We have Surat Al-Kahf. We have Surat Al-Mulk. Like, we have all of these defenses that Allah has given us to protect us. So we don't be preoccupied and scared about the possibility of others doing black magic on you.
Inshallah. Okay, one last question, then we'll wrap up. Marcus asks, and I'm sure you can answer this, bro, from personal experience too. What are good activities or hobbies to give a housewife so she doesn't get bored in the house?
It depends on her personal interests. Is she an outdoors person? If she's an outdoors person, is she like a socializing person? Is she more introverted? So if she likes outdoors, then go camping, go hiking, do sports together, for example, tennis. You can play tennis with your wife. And if you go to the courts at certain times, it's like free courts. There's nowhere around. You can have a nice tennis match. Like, I play tennis, or used to, with my wife. And it's funny because I'm just so much better at tennis than she is. But even though she, did tennis for many years, but I'm just naturally good at tennis, alhamdulillah. But yeah, just have fun in the outdoors. Even things
Man
like
said I meant indoor activities.
indoor activities. Okay, well, there are games that you can play. Flirting with your wife is always fun. Joking with your wife is always fun. There's all kinds of art that you can do together, like halal art that you can do, reading books together. There's like an endless number of activities that you can do together as a couple.
Right,
Yeah.
Allahumma barik. This reminds me of when you said art, bro, the stream you made and you showed us your mom's artwork. Allah
yeah.
yarhamha, may Allah grant her the highest levels of paradise and forgive her sins. But honestly, bro, like, I don't understand if a woman is housewife and she is also a homeschooler, how she would even have boredom, to be honest. I mean, any time that she gets outside of that, she would probably just take to herself, maybe rest, recharge, rejuvenate.
Everyone needs variety. Everyone needs like variety in their life. So even if, like, my wife, for example, every week it's tiring. You're just talking to kids and dealing with kids. You need time with friends. So she will socialize with other Muslim moms, and they'll go and have like a Muslim ladies' night or whatever. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly halal. And you should encourage that. You should facilitate that for your wife, because you don't want her to be isolated, and mentally it's difficult. You want to give her variety. Someone is suggesting like taking her out on dates. Like, definitely, like, go out on these halal dates, enjoy each other's company, have fun, flirt a lot, joke a lot with your wife. Don't be serious all the time. Have your inside jokes. Like, that's who else can you joke with? Who else can you joke with other than your wife? Like, who else can you flirt
Yeah.
with? Who else can you like make funny, crude remarks to other than your wife? Just have a good time. And that's what I recommend for all couples.
Homeboy said, I don't want her to leave the house too much in the West. She might see something. I mean, it depends where she's going, bro. Then someone wrote Marcus, be reasonable. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's fitna, of course, but you still got to give him that outlet, that need of belongingness. And unfortunately, bro, as men, we don't resonate with that many times. We can't empathize because we could be locked in and just be working all the time for like a long time. But women are more social animals. They do require that, alhamdulillah. So yeah, I mean, bro, is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I enjoyed the conversation with you, and enjoyed reading some of these comments in the chat.
Absolutely, inshallah. We didn't get to really touch on the topic of, matrix, entrepreneurship, maybe careers. We could do that, of course, another time, inshallah. But may Allah bless you and reward you and elevate you for all the hard work that you do. Guys, smash that like button, inshallah. To get more of Brother Daniel, head over to the Muslim Skeptic on YouTube. Allahumma barik, and inshallah, see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.